Hey, mister, can you help me? I got a flat tire.
You do? Come on up, son. I can't help it. Hold that. Thanks. Back tire?
Yep.
Funny how I do that. Nice chromy valve cap.
Thanks.
That should do it. Nice bike.
Thanks.
Right on, kid. And these are going to be my air tanks. They'll be mounted up under the cab where basically where the original fuel tanks used to be mounted up. They're going to be around 4 feet long, probably a couple parts notched out so they fit nice and tight up in there. They'll be joined, probably not by solid piping, but flexible hose from one side to the other. They'll be able to be tapped on either side to plug in like a coiled up air hose from either side. I'll have a gauge probably in the cab, show me how much pressure I have. Eventually an onboard air compressor, but also a spot on the outside to fill from a big air compressor. So these are 8-inch old steam pipes is what they are. I'll have to clean out the inside of them. About 0.010 I think thickness, plenty thick, and yeah, stainless steel, so they'll stay nice for a long time. Kind of excited about this one. There'll be a lot of fabricating, but should be pretty slick when I'm done. Got my redneck press brake in action. Got one side welded up. We've got the first tank all welded up and just about done for the most part. I'm going to leak test it right now. I got a T here that'll sit on. It's going to sit on top of it between a couple of the bed supports. From this side, I'm going to have a nipple and a hose going to the opposite tank on the other side of the truck. This will be where I can tap like a coiled hose or something into to use the air. Got a bung welded in down here for a drain, and that's about it on this side. But I'm going to plug a gauge into it here and charge it with air and see if she'll hold air. Okay, so I've had this thing empty and full a couple of times now. My original leak I found was a little pinhole in one of the welds at the end of one of my welds. So I got that filled back in, and then I filled it back up and got the soapy water out. And all the welds are good, but a lot of my fittings were leaking a lot. 3 of the fittings were leaking. But I had used Teflon tape on the fittings, and it was leaking around the plugs, the gauge. I see that one has a leak still, and that was one that I left the Teflon tape on. All the other stuff I put thread sealing compound on, some Loctite 567, and they are holding, so that's the ticket there. I'll work on some brackets now, and this is the passenger side, and then I'll get it mounted up and get to work on the driver's side. Well, I made some pretty cool mounts there. Some heim joints, actually worn out heim joints from work in the scrap bin. Did some shining up just with some red Scotch-Brite on a grinder wheel. Yeah, that's how she's gonna be. We got rubber bushings between things, and show you the front mount. Here's the front mount and the drain, which is.
Daddy, I love you.
I love you too, buddy. Well, I messed up. I didn't have the full 4 feet of my pipe to work with on the driver's side because of where my exhaust comes out, and I knew that, and I measured. I needed to cut down to about 3.5 feet, and I didn't. I got my angle all welded up on there. I'm leak checking it right now. I've got 110 pounds in it. I just wanted to show you what a significant leak looks like. Pretty obvious. Now a very, very, very tiny leak, it might look a little bit like that, but it'll be active. These are just bubbles that have rested there. On a tiny leak that is actually occurring, you'll see tiny little bubbles like that in a really, really fine foam, and that's what I'm looking for. This leak here, like I've been kind of debating on leaving the gauge under the truck on this. It may or may not end up like that. Not sure yet. But yeah, so far I don't see any of the tiniest leaks, so that's good. I'll make sure I spray all my welds and everything, but I'm just using a soapy water solution in a spray bottle. That's just a little bit of car wash and water, and that works wonderfully. Alright, so I think I'm going to leave my gauge on the outside. I can tell that by the fact that I built a guard around it. So yeah, I made that decision. I'm getting mounts up underneath done. Welded my bung or my protector around the drain. Burnt through it because I wasn't paying attention, so I'll fill that in. There's my front mount. rubber up front, just like on the other side. And there's clearance. Can't really see it in the picture, but enough clearance so it's not going to clang around on there. And then on this side, like on the other side, I'll use the Heim joints going up to the bed brace. I think it looks cool. Anyway, there's how it's looking so far. I got my hose coming off the back side of this gauge tee, and that'll cross over to the other tank on the other side. And then this tee here will serve to tap my air compressor into it. And I think I'm going to end up mounting it inside the toolbox here. Seems to be a fairly decent air compressor for no more than it was. It was only 60 bucks at Harbor Freight. So even if it goes bad, I don't have a lot into it. But anyway, I'm going to mount it sideways. It's oilless, so that's okay to mount it sideways. And I'll plumb it into that T underneath, and there will be a check valve, so when I'm filling the tank from the outside with a big air compressor, I don't overpower this little guy, so only air can go that way into the air tanks from this compressor and not backwards into this air compressor. Well, I just figure I messed up again. I tied these air tanks to I got one end tied to the bed and the other end tied to the cab. I don't think that's such a great idea. I changed up my bracketry, and I'll show you that. Ran my crossover hose. You can kind of see the yellow hose running over to the other side. And filled up the tanks to 120 last night, and it maintained 120 in the gauge. I added a, this is a valve cover actually, a tire valve, Schrader valve in there to be able to use just a regular tire fill attachment on a compressor to fill this thing, as well as the adapter that I made to fill from the quick disconnect. I put a little rubber cover on that to keep mud and stuff out of there. Everything's mounted up. My check valve is holding. You see that little 1/8 inch elbow at the back side of the T right here. Right in between this T and that elbow is a little bitty check valve, little 1/8 inch pipe threads. It's holding, obviously, so that's good. I put the check valve there so the air tanks, if I fill it via big compressor, it doesn't backfeed through the little compressor mounted in the truck toolbox. So my rear mounts are the same. Need to tighten that Heim joint, not that it's going anywhere, but on the front end, there's that. Cut that tab off where I had it rubber mounted up here because of the flex between the cab and the bed are going to be at a little bit different rate, and I figured it would strain the air tank mounting between the cab and the bed. So I went mounted to the bed and the frame here. You see a pretty simple mount, still rubber mounted. There's not going to be near as much flex between the bed and frame as there would be between the bed and cab. So I'm a lot happier with that. I'll grind the end of that bolt off so it's sticking down there. Plus my rock slider / exoskeleton will protect that as well. So that's the driver's side. Everything's good over here. See if I can show you. You can see where the yellow hose comes off the back side of that T there, and comes across there. I put a wire clamp right there that's loose, so it can the hose can move if it needs to, and it holds it up off of the exhaust. Alright, now we'll go over to the other side. Same deal with the front mount. I cut that tab off and went to the frame with the same 3/8 stainless bar stock there, rubber mounted. And then Same on the back end, kind of the Heim joint look for the back mounts. Once again, I put a rubber cap over the quick disconnect for the air hose, and ran over to a hose adapter or nipple right there, and a hose clamp. So everything's good and tight, ready to go, and I'm about to plumb up the compressor. I'll show you how I mounted it. Here's the fill adapter I built to be able to fill up these air tanks through the quick disconnect. Just a male on each end and a valve there, so I can go directly to my shop air, and fills up fast that way. I mounted my little cheap Harbor Freight air compressor on its side in here. Should be all right. I'm just gonna make it no external switch or anything. I'm gonna use the original on-off switch, fuse protection right there. I was gonna put an another external switch on it, but it's like I'll be getting into this toolbox for air hose and whatever else I'll need. I'll have the toolbox open anyway, so I'll just switch it right here. Less wiring, less to worry about as far as relaying and all that good stuff. I already got a grommet put in there right there, and that'll run the air hose and the wires. The compressor came with kind of like jumper cable clamps on the excuse me, on the wires. I'm gonna cut those off and go directly to probably the positive terminal block up there, which will be switch activated with a constant duty solenoid up under the hood. So it's going to be basically directly wired to the battery through that solenoid. And the air hose, it comes with this air hose on it, the compressor does. Put an 1/8 inch, or actually 3/16 pipe nipple with 1/8 inch threads on the end of the hose. Got a double female 1/8 inch connector. I'm going to use push lock type air hose. I'm not a huge fan. I work with it all the time, and I'm just not 100% convinced by it. It's easy and quick, and it's easy to tidy up compared to big thick rubber air hoses, but I'm just not impressed with the connections yet. They do work, but I tend to see a lot of them leaking too, so it'll be something I just have to monitor. So yeah, I'm gonna push lock to there and run down through the bed, through the toolbox, through the bed, and go into my little 1/8 inch elbow back there, and that will complete the plumbing. And like I said, the wiring will go up under the cab, and then we'll call this a project. Okay, I've got my air hose running in the stainless conduit there, and the wires running in the embarrassing chrome wire loom stuff. The steel conduit I had was just a tad too small to run those wires through, so they got the chrome loom treatment. And then on the top side, like I said, I've got them running through that grommet. I'll just do some pretty zip tying and should be good. As far as this compressor goes, you got a little air filter right here that you can take the cap off and service that air filter. And then, like I said earlier, the switch and fuse is on the back side of it. So I may build a little aluminum enclosure. I don't want to close it all in, but just to keep heavy things like my log chains and stuff like that from banging into it and stuff. Okay, so we're mounted up. I got my plumbing run into that push lock there, the wiring grounded to the frame and run up to the front. Comes up right there with some other wires. Right now I've just got it on a jumper, and I've already tested it. It's kind of funny here. First of all, it's a little noisy, which I kind of expected. Because it's mounted to the toolbox, but whatever. Got a little leak here. It's actually at the swivel of this 90. It's a used 90, so that's whatever. I'll change it out. No biggie. The funny thing is, I had 120 pounds in this, and that little compressor is actually adding to it. And it is advertised as a 150-pound air compressor. You can see the needle going up slowly, but the thing's got some cojones, it seems like. So we'll see if the little $60 compressor lasts. See if it lasts very long, but I'm pretty impressed. It's taking my tanks up to, it's at almost 130 now. So I think we'll be in good shape.